They didn't just win the AI boom, they positioned themselves so every winner had to go through them. The screens glow in a dim data center, rows of servers humming in a steady, almost hypnotic rhythm, heat rising in waves you can't see but can feel if you stand too close. Engineers scroll through dashboards, watching models train in real time, watching intelligence take shape line by line. Somewhere in that stack, buried under layers of software, frameworks, and abstractions, is the same thing powering all of it, and almost none of them are thinking about it. They're building products, writing code, racing each other to the future, but they're all running on the same foundation. This is the story of NVIDIA, and how a company that once made gaming graphics cards quietly became the control layer of artificial intelligence. This is the series where we break down the deals, decisions, and power shifts that built and destroyed billion-dollar empires. At first, it didn't look like dominance. It looked like a niche. In the early 2000s, NVIDIA was just one of several companies competing to make better graphics cards. Faster rendering, sharper visuals, smoother gameplay. The battlefield was gaming, and the rules were simple. More power meant better experiences. But inside those chips, something else was happening. Graphics processing units, GPUs, weren't just good at rendering images. They were good at doing the same calculation over and over again, thousands of times in parallel. It was a very specific kind of strength. Not general computing power, not flexibility, raw, repeated computation. At the time, it didn't feel like the future. It felt like a technical curiosity. Researchers began experimenting with using GPUs for things that had nothing to do with graphics. Scientific simulations, physics calculations, and eventually, early machine learning models. It was messy, unsupported, sometimes barely functional, but it worked, and more importantly, it worked better. This wasn't a faster version of what CPUs could do. It was a different approach entirely. And NVIDIA noticed they didn't just build faster chips, they built an environment around them. CUDA. At first glance, CUDA looked like a developer tool, a way to program GPUs more easily. But it wasn't just a tool, it was a decision. A bet that the future wouldn't be about the chip alone. It would be about the layer developers build on. This wasn't a hardware play anymore. It was the beginning of a platform. And platforms change the rules. Because once developers start building on your system, leaving becomes harder than entering. This wasn't a performance advantage, it was a lock-in advantage. They didn't say it out loud, but the shift had started. By the early 2000s, something else began to accelerate. Deep learning. Neural networks had existed for decades, mostly as theory, occasionally as experiments, but they were limited, too slow, too expensive, too impractical to scale. Until GPUs entered the picture, training a neural network required exactly what GPUs were built for: massive parallel computation. Suddenly, models that once took weeks could be trained in days or hours. This is where everything started to bend. The famous 2012 breakthrough, ImageNet, didn't just show that neural networks worked, it showed they worked better. And behind that breakthrough, GPUs. NVIDIA didn't create deep learning, but they made it usable. And that distinction mattered more than it seemed, because from that point on, every researcher chasing progress in AI started building on the same stack: CUDA, NVIDIA GPUs, the same ecosystem. Quietly, without a single dramatic moment, the industry began to converge. This wasn't a technology problem anymore. It was an infrastructure problem, and NVIDIA was solving it. Companies started scaling, universities started teaching it, startups started betting on it, and none of them were building their own foundation. They were renting it. Cloud providers entered the picture next. Amazon, Google, Microsoft. They didn't build their own AI chips at first, they bought NVIDIA'S. Massively, data centers filled with NVIDIA hardware. Entire regions optimized for GPU workloads. Pricing models built around access to that compute. It looked like competition, but it wasn't, because even the companies building the platforms were still depending on NVIDIA underneath. This is where the structure locked in. Every layer above, models, products, applications, was competing. But the layer below, it was consolidating, and NVIDIA was sitting right there. They weren't fighting for market share in AI products. They were collecting demand from all of them. That's a different kind of power, because if one company loses, another wins. But either way, the compute gets used, and the chips keep selling. This is where most people misunderstand what happened. NVIDIA didn't win because they had the best chip. They won because they controlled the environment the chips ran in. CUDA wasn't just software, it was gravity. Developers built tools on top of it. Libraries depended on it. Frameworks integrated with it. Entire workflows assumed it. Switching away wasn't just expensive, it meant rebuilding everything. This is where competitors struggled. AMD had hardware. Google built TPUs. Startups tried alternative architectures, but none of them had the same ecosystem. And without that, performance alone wasn't enough. Because developers don't choose what's theoretically better, they choose what works now. And NVIDIA worked everywhere. This is where everything started to fall apart for competitors. The gap wasn't just technical anymore, it was structural. Even companies trying to reduce dependence on NVIDIA were still building tools that worked best with NVIDIA. Even attempts at independence were reinforcing the system. That's the kind of loop that's hard to break, and it didn't happen by accident. NVIDIA kept pushing higher. They didn't stay at the hardware layer, they moved up. AI libraries, SDKs, pre-trained models, full-stack solutions. They weren't just selling chips anymore. They were shaping how AI gets built. This is the part most people miss. They didn't stop at controlling the base layer. They expanded upward just enough to guide everything above it, without competing directly with their own customers. That balance is rare. Too low, and you're replaceable. Too high, and you compete with your ecosystem. NVIDIA sat in the middle, and that's where control lives. Because if you own the layer everyone depends on, but no one directly competes with, you become invisible. And invisible infrastructure is the hardest to disrupt. This wasn't a product victory. It was a position where every breakthrough, every startup, every new model feeds into the same system. Even now, as the AI race accelerates, companies talk about models. Bigger models, faster models, smarter models. But underneath all of that, the same constraint exists: compute. And the same provider keeps showing up. This is the main concept at the center of NVIDIA's rise. They didn't dominate AI, they became the default way AI is built. And once something becomes default, it becomes very hard to replace. Because replacing it doesn't just mean switching vendors, it means rewriting the system. This is where the real risk sits. Not in losing a product cycle, but in losing control of the layer. Because once that happens, everything above it becomes dependent. And dependency scales faster than innovation. The companies building AI today are moving fast. Faster than any previous technology cycle. But speed comes with trade-offs. You build on what's available. You optimize for what exists. You don't stop to rebuild the foundation. And NVIDIA understood that. They didn't try to own the future directly. They made sure the future would run through them. That's a different strategy entirely. And it's why they're so hard to stop. Because to compete with NVIDIA, you don't just need a better chip. You need a better system, a better developer experience, a better ecosystem, and most importantly, you need everyone to move with you at the same time. That rarely happens. This wasn't about being first. It was about being the layer no one could afford to leave. And once you're there, you don't have to win every battle. You just have to stay in the middle of all of them. Because that's where the value flows. And that's where control stays. This wasn't the story of a company that built AI. It was the story of a company that made sure no one else could build it without them. And if that sounds familiar, it should, because this isn't the first time the future was built on top of someone else's system. And it definitely won't be the last.